Allah tests those who He loves, and the more He tests you, the more He loves you. And I believe this stuff too. Like, I was accepting my own abuse and my own suffering and thinking that it was like God's sign of loving us, and didn't realize how psychopathic that is. Kind of like, it's sadistic. Yeah, it's like He gets a kick out of hurting His own creation.
Why would God have to do this to us? It really does feel like post hoc rationalization that we're just suffering in this world and we don't know what to say. So we say, yeah, God is testing us. But in reality, we just made up that story to make ourselves feel better.
And I think Islam is a very depressing religion in itself. And it makes people believe that what they're going through, if they're suffering, is somehow like a way for them to get into heaven. So the more you suffer, the more patient you are, and the more dua you make, you're eventually going to heaven. For me, I always justified all the suffering I was going through, that, I would eventually get rewarded for it. So I never really thought I needed help. In my family, there's been a lot of trauma. My mom has been through certain things, and I've kind of had to step up and be her support. Yeah, and I feel like seeing her going through what she did made me more religious too, because I started going to religion for comfort. And at the end, it was just something that we used to just cope. I've seen my mom being abused. I often used to think, my dad was the problem, and in ways he was, but also there's a lot of stuff enabling him to do what he was doing. And it wasn't being addressed.
What was enabling him?
Religion, obviously.
How does Islam enable marital violence?
In Islam, it's permitted to beat your wife. There's a whole verse in the Quran that says you're not to beat your wife. And obviously, there's so many different interpretations people come up with. It has to be under this condition, under that condition. And I think this version of, you just only do it when it's very necessary and do it with a toothbrush. I think this version was created to appeal to Western audience in whose culture the domestic violence isn't already normalized. In the Arab culture, it's already normalized. Nobody needs to bring up justifications for it. It's just already known knowledge. People know that people beat their wives. And then Islam just comes up and gives you that, excuse to if it must happen, you're allowed to. Your husband has that right. There has been, plenty incidents, even in recorded in the hadith, where men have beaten their wives and the Prophet never said anything about it, to the point they were green and bruised. And even Aisha said that she never seen any woman suffer more than the believing women. Domestic violence is excused and permitted in Islam. It's given to them as their right. So whenever I told my uncle who was a hafiz, I told him, guide him, because my father only listens to his siblings. He doesn't listen to us. So, help him understand that what he's doing is wrong. He just looked at me and said, what do you mean it's wrong? Nothing's wrong. It's his wife. He can do whatever he wants. And you're his daughter. You should stay out of it. That's my mother at the end of the day. What do you mean I can't? I tried seeking help, asking, the people in my community. And that's what they have always told me. Don't talk about it. Don't shame your father. It's going to dishonor him. And all they told me was, just pray more, read this ayat, read this dua, read this, and I'll pray for you, and everything will be fine. And that's it, and nothing else. There came a point when my mother was so severely abused that I needed to call an ambulance for her. And when I did that, my uncles and my cousins came, and they told them that my brother accidentally called, and it was all a mistake, and they actually left. And when they left, obviously they turned on me, and they're like, oh, what kind of traitor are you? How could you betray your father? Because obviously when you call the ambulance, the police come with them. No, they just assumed I called the police. And, and I said I didn't call the police. That wasn't my intention. I was trying to get help from my mom. Yeah, that's how it is here. And I've been told this, that, it's a cultural issue. It's not religion. But it is tied to religion too, at least my version that I was following. At the end of the day, you can't excuse a whole version of Islam and call it culture when there's, mass amount of people who believe it.
You didn't have what many moderate Muslims families have. For example, the daughters can go out to the movies. They can choose who they get married to. You didn't have that. And so I find that sometimes people, they don't understand it. They don't empathize with us because they didn't go through that themselves. They're like, yeah, Islam's fine. And they wear hijab by choice. And they're shitting on people. They don't realize a lot of us, we never had a choice. You never had a choice whether you wanted to wear niqab or hijab. Yes, not every Muslim has that, but Muslims should also realize that people that are more religious and were following the text more closely, no matter what sect they're in, they tend to be more anti-women and less freedom of expression, less freedom of religion.
And the versions of Islam that's followed in the West, even though it's better, I like that kind of version. I think it's more peaceful, but we have to be honest, it's not, the closest thing to what real Islam is. This is the stuff that really got me confused and making me doubt everything. But I couldn't prove that the religion itself was false. How am I supposed to judge a religion if it's right or not just because I don't like some things about it? it took me a long time, like a couple years of just doubting and like searching to maybe, convince. I hope and pray that whatever I was thinking was wrong, and that I found some kind of like reassurance and guidance and like realized that what the hidden meaning behind everything. But it just never made sense. I just thought, like, how can I justify it? How can anyone justify hitting and beating a grown woman, a grown equal? Why is it okay for a man to beat his wife? And I tried. I really did try. I didn't want to believe that it was wrong for the longest I could, until I finally realized there is no logical reason. It's just false. But even then, I was still Muslim, still living with my family. I was still under all the same obligations as before. I wasn't working, wasn't allowed to go to school, and I was expected to get married. And the marriage thing constantly came up, and I constantly fought it and would be abused if I refused. I didn't know how to get out, but I just kept tolerating it for a long time. I just kept pretending to be someone I wasn't, until I realized, what, I don't want to pretend anymore. I had this assumption that, me just slowly not being religious, me slowly giving up certain practices would help them come to accepting me and still having that relationship with them. And I tried, basically, I stopped praying. My mom was begging me to just, please don't do this, you're gonna regret it. Please just pray, even if you don't want to, just force yourself, And by doing that, my father, he lost it. He dragged me out of my bed, he pulled my hair, he started beating me and pinning me down and strangling me and saying, are you gonna pray or not? Are you gonna pray or not? And I was like, no, leave me. And he yelled at this point, saying that if you don't pray, you're not a Muslim, you're a Murtad, and you know what happens to Murtads. I never thought my own father would do something like that he knew that what his religion was teaching. Like, some people would say, well, he was wrong for doing that because that's a state thing, whatever. It doesn't matter. A human life was threatened that day, and they continue to be threatened all around the world where these laws take place. So it just gave me a huge insight on what it's actually like to be an ex-Muslim in such a community. After that, living in that house was horror. I've never felt safe again. I've constantly been feeling at edge that something's gonna happen again. Like, one slip up and he's gonna attack me. I tried to be on my absolute best behavior whenever I was around them. It was deteriorating my mental health. It was during this time that I realized that I wasn't safe in my home, and I was considering either running away or getting married, or worst comes to worst, I was thinking about taking my life.